hello to everybody who's just joining. Welcome to our webinar on real estate tokenization. Please get comfortable. It's going to be a really interesting discussion, and I'm really looking forward to some of the topics that we'll be covering. We're still waiting for some participants to join, so we'll give it another 5 minutes. And meanwhile, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the Q&A section below. If you have a specific speaker you want to ask the question to, whether it's Mason or David, you can specify that in your comment, and we'll get to the questions at the end of the discussion. Meanwhile, hang in there and we'll be starting very soon. Hello to everybody. Welcome to our webinar on real estate tokenization. If you're just joining, feel free to drop any questions you may have in the Q&A section below, and we'll get to them at the end of the discussion. If you have a panelist or speaker that you want to specify the question to, you can just let us know who it's directed for, and we'll get started really shortly. We'll wait 1 more minute because we see people are still joining, so hang tight. Hello, so thank you everyone for joining us today. We're here to discuss real estate tokenization with Mason Borda, CEO of Tokensoft, a leading technology platform helping companies seeking to issue assets on the blockchain, and David Hochhauser, CRO of Tel Aviv-based cybersecurity firm Hub Security. We're going to start our webinar with a brief introduction to our speakers, and then I'll hand over the stage to David Hochhauser and Mason Borda for their presentations, and hopefully we'll have a really interesting discussion. And at the end, we'll hold a short Q&A to wrap everything up. If you have any questions, as I said earlier, feel free to drop them in the Q&A section below and specify which speaker it's directed to, and we'll get to them at the end. So I'm joined now by Mason Borda. Hello, Mason.
Hello, thanks so much for having me.
Mason is the CEO and co-founder of Tokensoft, which is a blockchain infrastructure firm that enables issuers to issue and manage their securities on the blockchain. He started his career at technology companies such as Boeing, Space Systems, and Broadcom, where he worked on the Wi-Fi chips that powered Apple devices. Mason entered the digital asset space in 2013, designing and building the infrastructure for a dollar-based blockchain. And in 2016, he built up the first commercially viable custody solution on the Ethereum network. Also, while at BitGo, he helped the company scale to over $1 billion in monthly digital assets. Welcome, Mason. We're happy to have you here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
We're also joined by David Hochhauser, CRO at Hub Security. David is an experienced executive in the global security industry with a broad background in security, enterprise software, and cloud-based services. David leverages his experience in cybersecurity from the hundreds of customers that he's met throughout his career and is currently focused on facilitating secure transactions on the blockchain. He is the CRO of Hub Security, a Tel Aviv-based cyber tech startup working on an innovative key management platform designed to protect cryptocurrencies, digital assets, and other highly sensitive data. Welcome, David.
Hello, Shterny. Glad I could be here today. And first, I'll hand over the stage to Mason, who will share with us his thoughts and insights on tokenizing real estate. And then we'll hear a bit from myself on why security is so critical in this area.
Okay, take it away, Mason.
Awesome. So I will share my screen here. Can everyone see this? All right.
Yeah, it looks good.
Okay. So Tokensoft is a blockchain infrastructure company that helps enterprises, asset managers, and financial institutions basically issue, manage, and manage their securities on the blockchain. We do this internationally. So far, we've helped our customers comply in over 50 countries. We're doing a few different projects, like the first security token IPO, as well as other registered offerings in the US. And we also service financial institutions through Tokensoft International AG. We are servicing SEBA, which is a Swiss-based bank. What sort of drove us to do this, to have this conversation, was we recently did an announcement about our private label marketplace for real estate asset managers, where they can provide additional liquidity to their investors who have invested in their funds. And so this talk is going to be mostly focused around that. In terms of our company mission, why do we use the blockchain? The blockchain is good at setting rules between various parties that may or may not know each other. And so we see it as basically enabling all financial participants to operate by the same rules. So we see it as a tool to restore integrity to the financial markets, which have become more challenging to manage in modern times. So far, through our platform, we've processed over 100,000 investors. Our customers have used our platform to raise over $500 million, and our clients are currently seeking to raise over $3.5 billion. And so we've been around since 2017 doing this. So it was right when the regulators were starting to say, hey, these digital assets look like securities. So we said, okay, well, can we build some infrastructure to help service the market of companies that want to do securities on the blockchain? A little bit about myself. Co-founder and CTO is James Poole, and he previously worked at companies like RSA, Symantec, creating cybersecurity software. We also were recently joined late last year by Alex Levine, who was former senior counsel at the SEC, CFTC, and he's helping us a little bit more on the regulatory side. So it's just a little bit of general info about the company. And like I said, yeah, we started in 2017. So we've been doing this for a little bit now. And I just wanted to focus the conversation around real estate. So why did we sort of create a solution that's geared specifically towards real estate asset managers? It was primarily just demand based, but as we dug into the problems associated, that come up in the space, secondary transactions in particular are really interesting to look at. They're still largely paper based. They're complex. They need lots of legal review, a lot of perspectives to take a look at a transfer. And as a result, that slows down the process. So anytime a process is just very complicated, it's less likely to be done. And so we basically built a solution that helps streamline these processes to make it easy. And that's what I'm sort of going to dig into today in a little bit more depth. And so we use the term real estate tokenization to describe the act of putting real estate assets on the blockchain. But what does that mean? It's a very ambiguous and still a very new term. And so why are we doing this? So basically we learned that all this stuff is a compliance problem. So we can automate the compliance around these transfers, and as a result provide more opportunities for liquidity for investors that want to either exit or reinvest or interact a little bit more with these assets that they are currently invested in or are seeking to invest in. And so basically, what our software is doing is it's converting these paper-based transactions into automated digital workflows. And it does this using the blockchain as a backbone to reinforce the rules. So we're not necessarily doing anything revolutionary, except that now the blockchain is there. And I'll talk a little bit about the value that brings. So one thing is it enforces the rules that are found in these paper contracts. A lot of these rules are very ambiguous. There was regulation in the past that was trying to remove the ambiguity, in particular in Dodd-Frank, but these things keep getting ripped out. And so what we found is the blockchain just provides us a really good opportunity to make the rules of the game and the transfers just very transparent and clear. And as a result, transactions are faster because there's no ambiguity, and we can better enforce the compliance requirements. So we can ensure that transactions that happen can just happen, and transactions that shouldn't happen can either get rejected just right away, or they can require further review by professionals. And so this ease of use that's created just increases the likelihood of investors engaging in secondary transactions. So in our platform, the investors basically have the option to engage in secondary transactions. It's a much more streamlined process. And so what we found is just the throughput is a lot higher as a result. And so I just want to go through the life cycle a little bit. And as an example, I wanted to use a fund that already exists just to remove any ambiguity. And so let's say there's an asset manager that runs a fund. That fund has investments in commercial real estate. The fund is backed by, let's say, 100 investors. This fund has already been subscribed to. So the investment for this fund has already been closed. All the paperwork already has been signed. And so essentially what our software does is it takes this paper world of securities. And in this case, there's securities that represent interest in a fund that's investing in real estate. And we reflect that onto the blockchain. So all of these sort of paper-based securities. Like, let's say there's a security and with 100 shares, we can now reflect that on the blockchain with 100 tokens, for example. And those are allocated to the investors on the blockchain. And so now these paper contracts are reflected onto the blockchain. The investors are now set up with blockchain-enabled investment accounts, and so we have a investor portal in our platform that does that very simply. And now that they have their investment accounts on the blockchain, their securities are sort of distributed to them. So they have their paper contract, they can verify the amounts of ownership on the blockchain. And now the blockchain is sort of used to set the rules of those transfers of those securities. And so now the investor has received their securities. What does it look like when they're actually seeking liquidity? Well, now in the same experience, they can submit orders. So they can log in, they can view their portfolio if they have multiple investments. They can view whatever reporting information they receive from the asset manager communications. And additionally, now they can submit an order to either purchase additional shares in the fund or to sell their shares in the fund, either in whole or in part. And so now the investors have submitted their orders. And next, what happens through our partner broker-dealer is orders are matched, filled. If there's any complex approval processes, those have to be undertaken. They may be reinforced by the blockchain. They may be so ambiguous that they need to be reviewed by a person. And then from there, the orders are settled after the appropriate approvals are done. And so we talked at a high level about the process. I want to go a little bit more into depth about where things connect. So we talked about the process, but where's the blockchain and where's the paper, and how does it all sort of connect? And so this section is called Securing Your Securities, because we're going to dive a little bit deep into how the blockchain just provides a layer of security and enforcement with respect to regulatory and compliance requirements. And so let's say that someone is seeking to submit a sell order. And so what happens on the blockchain, so obviously there's the blockchain, and in order to interact with the blockchain, you have to have a private and public key pair to authorize any sort of activities with your accounts. It's that simple. And so when you want to submit a buy or sell order, or when you want to transfer your security from one person to another, you need to provide the cryptographic authorization to undertake that activity. And so that means that your private key has to sign a transaction that says, I want to do X on the blockchain. The blockchain reviews it based on the rules that it has for your accounts, and then it processes it. And so this cryptographic authorization is something that's sort of fundamental to interacting with the blockchain. And so, and what this is basically doing is it's saying, I am who I say I am, and I can do this activity that I want. And so it's sort of it's the underpinning of the identity layer. So, and that's what's providing a little bit of additional security versus traditional systems, is this cryptographic authorization is necessary. Okay, so a buyer or seller wants to undertake a transaction. They provide the authorization to do that cryptographically with their private key. In our platform, they don't know they're doing that. We sort of hide it in the back. And now that transaction is sent to the blockchain, where it's reviewed, and it might be authorized or rejected based on some rules, the rules that are set at the blockchain layer. And the next thing that happens, so obviously for regulators, it's not enough for them to just look at the blockchain and to figure out, what's happening. It's almost impossible to tell. And so the next thing that happens in our platform is paperwork is signed. And so paperwork needs to be signed in order to make this transaction legally bound. And so this transaction might not settle until after the paperwork is signed. The blockchain might be used as a filter to see if the transaction is valid or not, but there's always a activity that happens on the blockchain and a corresponding activity that happens on paper. And the blockchain is just used to streamline this process significantly. And so obviously our good friends at Hub are hosting this webinar. So how do these sort of pieces connect? So basically what we're using Hub for is sort of this cryptographic authorization to make sure that only people that are who they say they are undertaking the activities that they're authorized to take. And then we sort of abstract the blockchain away. And so we think of ourselves as a layer on top of the blockchain that makes it easy to use and just streamlines a lot of the activities and compliance requirements that need to be undertaken for issuers. And just to review it again, so what exactly does the cryptographic authorization layer do? So this verifies the identity of the individual or an entity. It might be a broker-dealer, it might be an RIA, it might be an institution. And it also authorizes the individual or entity to interact with the blockchain, or provides the authorization to interact. And then what does the blockchain do? The blockchain just enforces the rules around the transactions and makes sure that only transactions that should happen, and those that shouldn't don't happen. And this is sort of the most important part, I think, when we're thinking about, how do regulators see the space and how do we actually build trust in these financial markets that are being rebuilt on the blockchain. And I think the fact that the blockchain just memorializes successful and unsuccessful transactions with respect to securities is probably the most important thing. So whenever an administrator in the back is interacting with the security, this is tracked. Whenever a transfer is happening, it's tracked. Whenever a transfer fails, for whatever reason, this is tracked. And I think just this, the ability to audit these transactions with a blockchain that's decentralized is very fascinating. You can also do this with a private blockchain internally, but the value of memorializing this becomes a little bit less. And then why is there paperwork involved? We need something to be to provide sort of the legal enforceability of the contract, of the transfer. And so again, it's great to have the blockchain, but for regulators and broker dealers and other market participants, it's not enough. There has to be paper. Otherwise, the paper is useless, if you ask me. So hopefully one day we can get rid of the paper. And that's all I have for this section of the presentation. And I'll hand it off to David to take it from here.
Okay, thank you, Mason. And let me just share. Okay, hey, thank you, Mason. And as usual, I always learn every time I listen to you. So that was very, very helpful personally as well. First of all, on a lighter note, I'll just let you in on a little secret. If you like my hairstyle, it's a result of my wife essentially putting a number 6 in the blade on the electric razor and just moving it around my head. So with that, for the rest of you, I hope everyone is at least staying safe and hopefully starting to get out a little bit more, especially to the barbers. So now I'll spend a few minutes on why security is really so critical and how it makes such a difference in tokenizing real estate. I know Mason touched upon it a little bit, and then I'll try to expand on that just a little bit further. Okay, there we go. So first, let's just look at the basic process and quickly, just so we have a baseline for it. If we look at real estate transactions today, as Mason said, it's generally slow and tedious. And some of the steps involved, those we talked about, there is identifying and, and verifying the parties. So it could require physical IDs, sometimes, presence of participants involved. You need to collect and sign all the contracts. So you have investor documents, banking documents, escrow documents, and then you start making copies for everyone all over the place. And you have a really complex and scattered paper audit trail. All told, it can take, weeks to months, right, for a transaction between even relatively, few investors. So not only, is it slow, as Mason discussed, but, that inefficiency, as it meant, limits the liquidity and the number of investors. And what's funny about this insecurity is typically seen as slowing things down, even further. But as you'll see, security is actually the critical enabler of a more efficient process. And so first, I know there's different levels of knowledge on here, and there are some people with pure business background. So first, you need some background in kind of an area of security, as mentioned, called cryptography. So on this one slide, I'm going to teach you everything you need to know about cryptography in 3 minutes, equivalent to your PhD equivalency diploma from MIT in applied math, and you don't have to spend 6 years going through graduate school. The essence of it is digital signing and encryption that we talk about is literally all about 2 keys. So you have a private key and a public key. And only you have your private key. There's 1 copy of it. So everyone else gets copies of the public key. So when you kind of mathematically sign a document, that is your unique signature. And anyone who has the public key can actually read that signature, and it will know that it was you who actually signed it. So you can imagine that actually protecting that private key and protecting how and where it's used is absolutely critical. That private key is essentially your identity, and that's the core of what we're doing. And that's it. You get your diploma at the end. So now, how does the digital token version of real estate investment work? Well, most of it revolves around the digital real estate token and what is called a smart contract. So let's focus on the smart contract since it's doing most of the work. Okay, a smart contract, it's simply lines of code, a program that automatically executes the terms of the agreement between, you have a buyer and a seller, and it executes those terms between the 2 of them. The code and the agreements exist across the blockchain network. So everyone sees the same exact contract and documents. Okay, so for a real estate transaction, for example, the smart contract is coded to say receive assets. They could be funds from the bank or the tokenized real estate fund being sold. The smart contract, literally the code, is also coded to transfer those assets between the buyer and the seller. And once all of the settlement rules, there'll be settlement rules inside of that code. Once that's resolved, that's the transfer will occur. So for example, one of the rules may be to set up an escrow account for the funds, which will be done automatically as well. And it can also include rules for, say, reversal during the escrow period. Okay, so all those rules are actually encoded, and that's what makes this so efficient, is that you're automating this process. The thing about this is all those steps that were mentioned, none of this can occur without security, and specifically the cryptography that we discussed. So you must have trust, meaning all the actions and documents are digitally signed and encrypted. Okay, so you know definitively who signed each step and what was signed and when. Step 2 is it must be protected. So if you're using cryptography and signing and encrypted, no one can deceptively change and go in and change any of the documents and smart contracts, or modify the audit trail. So once it's signed and encrypted, that's it, it's set. And third, it really must be efficient. So it's this convenience and efficiency, that makes it more enticing for to get more investors, which is the goal of the whole process. So with smart contracts, I mean, you're saving a lot of time normally wasted on all the manual processing we saw at the beginning and all the heaps of paper documents that are going on. So it's essentially all digitally signed and encrypted, and then it's placed on the blockchain, which is kind of think of it as a repository for everybody to see, for all involved, and they see the same exact information. Okay, so that's essentially the whole process of how security underlying, what it is today, what the security is, and what we're actually doing as far as cryptography is concerned and the security. Now, in general, so for a little bit of promotion, of course, not all the security solutions are the same. And you can see, and you've obviously see how critical it is in the process. So Tokensoft, being an exceptionally bright group of people, decided to work with Hub Security for what some would arguably say is the most advanced security solution for tokenization. So let me give you an example. There are further enhancements, to ease the investor management experience and therefore liquidity. So typically, many protect the keys with kind of paper and vault or use less secure technology. So what really happens is to protect this key, which is everything for high value transactions, you might literally physically split it into three and place different parts of the key in different physical locations and vaults around. And when it has to be signed, people have to actually come together. So they all agree, put it on a computer and actually sign. Now that process can take, hours and even days sometimes to actually sign high value transactions. What we do with Hub Security that you could see is we have an extremely ultra secure vault that has these hardware enclaves inside. One, to protect the keys so they never leave this vault, and two, the actual transactions. So all the transactions literally run in the vault as well. So you never want these keys to ever leave, even when you're using them. And we use a very secure handheld device, kind of a mini hardware secure module. And it's used probably by the real estate fund owners, for example, or by high value investors. So that enables them to safely sign every one of the real estate transaction in minutes. So it doesn't go ahead and people have to get the keys. It's an extremely secure process that can be done, and it can be done remotely. And so it securely identifies who you are and then permits you to approve and safely sign the transactions. So this way you could be certain. Also, it shows you on the device what you're signing. So you'll be certain what you see is what you're signing, because otherwise anywhere else you see that information, somebody could have gotten in and modified that. Okay. So in net, it all results literally in much enhanced trust, protection, and the efficiency, which is ultimately what we're shooting for here, because we're ultimately shooting for more investors and improved liquidity. Okay, so I hope you understand from that, a bit more about the benefits of the real estate tokenization and obviously the central role security plays in it. I thank you for listening, and I'll hand it back to Shterny, and then we'll have Q&A and you could ask away.
Great, thank you. Thank you both, Mason and David. These were all super fascinating topics, and I'm so glad that we got the time to cover them all today together. While all of them require a bit of deeper discussion, we've got a lot of questions. We're very grateful that you could take the time to flesh them out for us. Now I'd like to take the opportunity maybe to open the floor to our attendees. Anyone who might have questions, like I said, feel free to drop them in the Q&A section below or in the chat. That works too. We already have a few questions here, so I'm just going to jump right into it. Quite a number of them are from Mason. So for Mason, somebody had a question. Smart contracts will pave the way for predefined parameters to be embedded to tokens that represent the underlying asset and can undoubtedly create efficient value transfer in this asset class. The transformation is underway. How long can legacy systems and processes hold out?
I think the one thing we've learned from all the database breaches that we've seen is that legacy systems are very, very resilient. it's unlikely that the current systems completely go away. But I think if we can use new systems to grow the market, then that's already a fairly huge win. So yeah, I think I think legacy systems are very sticky. Like there's financial institutions out there that still transact by fax, is what I learned in the past couple of years. And but hopefully this new technology does grow the market very quickly and does bring new opportunities to folks that aren't looking at this type of a solution yet.
Right, interesting. Another one for Mason is, are all your securities private, or do you also work with public securities? And can a group choose which blockchain to use?
Yeah, so there's two registered offerings that we're doing. One is a 40 Act fund, that's a Form N2. The other one is a F1 offering, so that's a foreign company doing an IPO in the US. And so those are ones that we service. It's Tokensoft, and we have a transfer agent that helps service those. We also integrate with traditional custodians and banks to make those possible. And then private securities, obviously we've done a lot of exempt Reg D offerings. So definitely tons of those. And the second question was around blockchains.
Yeah, can a group choose which blockchain to use?
Yeah, we do integrate upon request. So if there is a business case that the customer has for a different blockchain, we're happy to comply.
Great. I have one for David here. Your security methods are similar to Radius. Are your security methods similar to Radius security devices? And I guess follow-up questions: what happens if the value fails, is destroyed, or stolen?
Okay, and if I recall the Radius, I'll hold off on the Radius because I think I understand what you're saying, but I'm not certain, so I may have to just clarify something. But let me just give you in general. There's two parts to this on failing, right? Because we have a back-end vault and a front-end device. The vault itself and the back-end is really what's securely holding everything. There's backup that's occurring, as well. There's multiple ways of doing backup mechanisms. So it's really a matter of a combination of process and automation that we can actually back it up. So not concerned. We could also it's also put in as high availability backup. So if it does fail, it'll just fall over, fell over to the next machine. As far as the handheld devices, they're meant as a secure means of communicating. They're not actually doing all the signing onto the blockchain, and we associate it with an individual. So if that device breaks or is stolen, what will end up happening is we have control at the vault. We'll just shut that unit down, and we'll just replace it and give you a new one and connect the individual with that on the vault. So there really isn't any risk of actually that device breaking and falling off that you lose track. That's a key thing, because a lot of times you deal with keys and somebody loses them and then they're in trouble. But in this case, we're safely storing everything centrally at the same time.
Great.
And the Radius one, I'll follow up afterwards because I just want to be certain, and I'll get back to you. I see who's asking it, and I'll follow up with you as well. I'll find out a little bit more on that.
Great, thanks, David. This one I think is for Mason. Is this more of a private bulletin board type liquidity machine versus an exchange? And I think when they say this, they're referring to Tokensoft.
We'd be happy to connect directly and talk more about that. So feel free to reach out to me directly.
Okay, great. Would paper not be required if securities were qualified by the SEC?
I'll let you deal with
This
that.
depends on what is approved by the SEC in the registration statement. So I think where the SEC is right now is that everything is looking like a negotiation based on what's in the registration statement. So we're not seeing a lot of consistency there, and I think you can see things like Blockstack it's a blockchain, but they did it as a security token, like they did it as a security, offering the security as under Reg A, and the intent there is to have it operate more as a bearer instrument. And so you can negotiate that with the SEC in your registration statement. But otherwise, I think most issuers should expect to have a transfer agent involved and to uniquely track each of their securities and the holders of each of their securities, because that's more in line with how the majority of the regulations in the space work today. So that's my response to that.
Great. I think that was a good one. Another one for you, Mason, is do you have a protocol in place that tracks the security tokens that Tokensoft produces?
Yeah, so basically the way I would think about the protocol is what is enforcing the rules on the blockchain and saying, yes, you can do this, no, you can't do that. Our software basically does read information that is governed by the protocol, I would say. Or if it's a blockchain where there's no protocol and the blockchain itself has the rules, we can also read directly from that. Our software does read from the blockchain and provide that information in a digestible format.
Great. I have another one for you. I think many of them are for you. So could you please share a bit about how a real estate debt tokenization process might work?
Not with the time that we have here, but
In a nutshell?
I think my basic response to that is if you look at sort of the phasing that I outlined, that real estate debt offering could be handled traditionally, and then we could take it from there. But yeah, if you'd like to connect directly, I can walk you through the motion. I'd be happy to walk you through the motions and what it actually entails.
Yeah, you can connect with him, info@tokensoft.io or just tokensoft.io. They have some sort of contact information there, or through LinkedIn. Another one for you, Mason. Are investors able to hold their tokens in their own wallets and transfer them out of Tokensoft's system to trade them openly with peers?
Yeah, so I think the folks on our team are we've all been in the blockchain space for a while, and so we really do value the peer-to-peer aspect of the blockchain and the openness as well. So all of our infrastructure is designed to openly integrate with others. I think so I think when you're thinking about that, yes, so you can use either our services or use other services externally. We're happy to comply with either structure.
Great. Can you further explain the secondary market for these securities?
I think I might need a little bit more context there. If you want to just email us at info@tokensoft.io, I could dig into that a little bit more.
Great. Next one, Tokensoft sounds great for institutions, but what about small investors where an expensive device just does not make sense financially?
To that, I say, what makes you think it's expensive? We do have different options for different customer segments. So I think, yeah, I wouldn't necessarily have that be a blocker.
Yeah, I think that that could lead into our next question, which is how do you price out the Tokensoft platform? Is it case by case?
It depends on how crazy the project is. So we do have standardized pricing and a standardized offering. Occasionally there will be larger financial institutions that have some specific requirements. But I'd be happy to. I see the message. I'd be happy to connect directly and to continue the conversation.
Great. For David, what are the unique selling propositions which Hub Security has to offer in comparison to other HSM solutions on the market for securing private keys?
Well, so in two respects, I mean, one with respect to Tokensoft, because we're tightly integrated with the solution. So the overall thing is we're actually trying to hide as much of the security as possible behind the scenes. But in general, there's several key points I'll go through quickly in this time. One is the level of security. It's actually designed, if you're familiar with FIPS level 4, so it's an extremely secure environment. The other thing is extremely flexible from that perspective. In other words, it's really more of a platform where one of the major things is we can actually code to it and put applications on there. So we run the software, some of the key critical software on it as well, and not just store the keys. So it is something that we could actually modify, and the chips are programmable, and we've coded everything ourselves. So if there are new algorithms that come out, it's flexible. We can send it as a firmware, where a lot of places you end up having to go and replace the box and do something else with it in order to get different algorithms on there. So it enables us to stay up to speed very quickly. And the third is actually the secure device. It lets us do everything remotely. So as one example, there are a lot of players dealing with being at home due to the virus. And when they go in and they want to make some transactions for high value stuff, they had to physically be there, and they could only do it at certain times of the day. That secure device is an extremely secure channel dedicated to that vault, and it enables us to remotely manage the box. And it also provides for high value approvals and requests to occur remotely that literally doesn't exist in most other applications. So that's at a high level. And obviously, of course, we could go into it in more detail later on.
Great. I think Mason disappeared for a second, so I'm going to ask you a follow-up to that. Are the hub security vaults stored and hosted at your location or at the clients? And that's a great question.
Yeah. So again, with in this regard, specifically with Tokensoft, we supply technology, and Tokensoft has the option. They actually run the service themselves, and they'll run the entire environment, including the box. There are places that actually want to keep that key and that processing on their site, and we also together we could easily, Tokensoft could run pieces of it. They could place the whole solution on somebody's site, or they could just put the box dealing with the key on their site. So it kind of gives you the option of whichever way you're doing it from that perspective. So anybody using this solution, they really have the option of using it either as full service, or they could put components on site as well.
Great, thank you. For Mason, what is the posture of the regulatory regime with regard to standardizing rules that would require this level of security? One would think that would advance the pace of transformation. I'm not sure if it's so clear, that question, but.
Yeah, so I think that I think the regulators are still absorbing everything that's going on. I think one of the challenges is if you look at like just the traditional cryptocurrency infrastructure, everything is in a single vertical. So the cryptocurrency exchanges out there, they do custody, they do exchange, they do compliance. And the challenge with the security space is everything's very fragmented because no one on Wall Street trusts one another, and so there's all these regulations that separate all the different groups of people. And so you can't do everything. You have to do, you either do custody or you do investment banking and help fundraise, or there's a lot of different pieces that help bring a security to market. And that's one of the big challenges. So the SEC has to actually dig in and understand, how does a transfer agent work? How does custody of digital securities work? How do they transfer? How are they tracked? And how do they meet existing regulations? And so we've been doing a lot of education, and we think we think they have a really good understanding of how everything works, really good understanding of cybersecurity risks in particular, and as well as what are the risks to the investor when they're interacting with this? What are all the things that could go wrong? And I think we're almost there. I'm hoping we're at a point where how they want all of the blockchain companies interact with the space can become a little bit more clear. But I would say that having a solution like Hub does help a lot. The FIPS in particular helps check one of those regulatory boxes off, which is why it was interesting to us. And when we do have conversations with the SEC, that's really a core piece of functionality that they want to make sure is there. And so that's been really interesting. I think that's basically coming from the perspective of like regulatory clarity, and then what are they looking at in terms of cybersecurity options out there. So I hope that sort of captures your question.
What is the investor appetite in using real estate tokenization compared to conventional REIT?
That might be completely out of my wheelhouse. I'm not the real estate guy in these situations. We do have, I mean, our customers are seeing a lot of traction and interest from their investors. You know, otherwise they wouldn't be looking at solutions like us. So I would say there's a lot of movement in the space.
Great, thank you. Let's see, another one here from Mason. Does Tokensoft run an exchange where, does Tokensoft run an exchange to buy and sell security tokens?
I would respond to that with, you know, we provide technology to our customers so they can enable secondary transfers of their securities.
Okay, great. And what blockchain technology do you use? Is there market and support from cities and states for blockchain and real estate transactions around transfer of deeds and titles?
I think that's a really cool use case that has not been explored. Is the solving that title insurance problem. I think blockchain is actually perfect for that. So you can have a public record of all the titles, and they're already public, and you can actually track the transfers of all the titles as well. And so I think that that's a huge use case that hasn't been explored. It might require the right partners to make that happen. I think that's maybe why there hasn't been significant traction. It's just a niche that is largely operated by very large old companies. So I think that's definitely a really cool use case to look into with the blockchain.
Yeah, and I think the first part of the question was, what blockchain technology does Tokensoft use?
Yep. So we can integrate with either public blockchains or private blockchains. So most of our customers are on Ethereum, and which is a public blockchain. So basically, we create a permission network on a public blockchain to make that happen. And then we've had customers that wanted to use, for example, R3 Corda and private blockchains like that. Or sometimes they have a proprietary internal blockchain that's only used internally, which is a derivative of one of these better known blockchains. So we just try to provide that flexibility just because, you know, it's not for us to say which blockchain you use or you don't use. It's more for us to say, you know, how can we help you meet your compliance requirements rather than what technology do you want to use.
Great, thank you. Do you have a use case of a project using the Tokensoft platform, which had been implemented, and how did it perform?
Yep. So I think if you just go on the SEC Edgar website and type in Tokensoft, then you can take a look at some of the registered offerings that are out there, like INX Limited or ARCA Funds, which is a U.S. Treasury-backed stablecoin. And so basically a dollar that's invested is used to purchase a dollar in US treasuries, and a token is sent back to the investor. So there's use cases like that you can take a look at, and the registration statements are sort of a good outline of how they use us and what they use us for. And yeah, so that's a great place to look.
Great, and if you have a link to it, maybe you can drop it in the chat. Does the Tokensoft platform eliminate the need for a transfer agent?
It depends on the use case. So if it's a registered offering, then yes. If there are transfers occurring, then yes. So it's an option that we provide to our customers as needed.
Great. David, has Hub Security managed any Reg A tokens?
You know, honestly, I'm not always sure which one. I'm going to ask actually, because we're enabling it. So I don't know if Mason, if you know if we've used it underneath for those that have been registered a tokens.
Yeah, so Hub Security is used. Yeah, so Hub Security is used for all registered offerings, and previously I mentioned the N2 offering and the F1 offering, but we don't have any Reg A's at the moment, I don't believe, that are using this. But it's the same process. It's a registered offering, goes through the SEC, gets approval by the SEC, and then it goes live.
Great. I think I have one last question here in case I missed any. Mason, how is Tokensoft different from something like Securitize or Carta?
Yep. So I can't probably speak specifically to those companies. I would say that you know, we definitely have built some really interesting solutions. So just because of the level of depth of blockchain experience we have, we've been able to build some very usable software on top of it. And so I think that's one thing that's interesting when you're looking at a solution like us is we make this, you know, the blockchain usable for all ages and backgrounds. And I think the other thing to look at is we just get a little bit closer with our customers and build closer to customer needs, which is why we're able to service the registered offerings. Those do have very complex requirements, and so, you know, we're happy to work closely with our customers, just get really deep with, you know, what problems they have and what they need from a compliance perspective, and actually to help build into those. I think our deployment through Tokensoft International AG into Seba Bank is a really good example of that, where we can get very granular with needs and build a custom tailored solution with our existing software. And so, yeah, that's sort of like how I would think about like where our strengths are.
Great. Well, I think that was our last question. And thank you everyone for joining us today. And thank you to our speakers, David Hochhauser and Mason Borda. We hope you're all staying safe and healthy at home, and we look forward to hosting many more discussions like these. To stay up to date on upcoming webinars, follow Hub Security on LinkedIn or Twitter so you don't miss a beat. And you can also check out Hub's weekly digest on Medium for the latest stories in the coming out of the blockchain and crypto sphere. And to learn more about Tokensoft, you can go to tokensoft.io or find them on LinkedIn. I think Mason's going to drop or has dropped some contact information in the chat box. So feel free to reach out to him directly or to David if you have any questions about Hub Security's cryptographic solutions. And thank you everyone for joining us, and we hope to see you at our upcoming webinars. Stay safe, stay healthy, and stay inside.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
We'll see you next week.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a good day. Thank you.
Guys.